The work title of this little speak here, I might have regretted it later because it dawned to me that version 3 is definitely not the right thing to call this here. First of all, Lykke-Per, written by Henrik Pontoppidan, is not the first Lykke-Per written in Danish. The very first novel called Lykke-Per was written by an author that probably is more famous here in Greece than Henrik Pontoppidan, namely Hans Christian Andersen. And the outset then for part of my speech will be, why 2 novels called Lykke-Per? And what was going on in the mind of Henrik Pontoppidan when he baptized his novel Lykke-Per? Spelled in a little different way, but nevertheless, same name, same title. So I think that it's the concept of lykke that is the difference, or part of the differences between Henrik Pontoppidan and Hans Christian Andersen. 2 ways of seeing what lykke actually is. But it also, the reason is due to, of course, that they write in 2 different periods of time. Hans Christian Andersen's novel is from 1870, and now why I sort of regretted version 3, because when I dug into the works of Henrik Pontoppidan, it dawned to me that he himself edited Lykke-Per several times. Now, not only did the first version of Lykke-Per, was the first version of Lykke-Per published in booklets, small parts of the novel. The first one was published in 1898 and was called Lykke-Per, His Youth. The second one was also published in 1898. It was called Lykke-Per, His Love. Third was published in 1899, and it was called Lykke-Per Abroad. And could continue. There was a little intermezzo, a little pause in his writing, and then in 1901, next part of Lykke-Per's saga was published under the name Lykke-Per, His Great Work, and yet another one, Lykke-Per, His Dearest, in 1902, Lykke-Per, His Travel to America, 1903, and Lykke-Per, His Last Struggle, 1904. That was quite a long period of time to produce that novel, even though it's more than, in this version that I have, more than 800 pages. But already, having published the first couple of booklets, Henrik Pontoppidan started to edit his work. He wanted to make the language simpler. He thought, for some reason or another, that making the language simpler would make the style more masculine. I don't know how he got that idea that simplicity of style should be more masculine, but that was his purpose. So in 1905, yet another version of Lykke-Per was published in 3 volumes. And what we stand with today is Lykke-Per published in 1918, 2 volumes. And these 2 volumes is the Lykke-Per that is the basis of also Bille August movie called A Fortunate Man. So this was a little story about how it came to be Lykke-Per or Lykke-Per as it's translated into English. Now, I will reflect a little upon this translation also. Lucky, fortunate, only covers half of what the Danish concept of lykke actually means. for a Dane, Lykke is also covering the field of feeling happy, of happiness. It's not just a matter of being lucky or a fortunate man, it's also the feeling of, well, how should I put it? Because happiness is such a strange thing, isn't it? I mean, sometimes Danes are put on a world list called the happiest people in the world, sort of ranking number one, sometimes number two. I think we are number two right now. The Finns are more happy than we are for some reason or another, probably their climate. But I do not think that this idea of the happiest people actually covers what it means for a Dane to be happy, because it's measured in all kinds of income, education, whatever. No, I think really that if you ask a Dane, I would say that it's more the feeling of being content. That you are happy with what you are, where you are in this world, and then Denmark, of course, is the most wonderful country in the world, that's for sure. But that was a little about the difficulties alone translating this novel into English, and I won't touch more upon the translation, but we'll continue later on with the idea of happiness and luck, that sort of thing. Now, yet another thing that should be reflected here is, of course, not only what is called Lykke, but also the concept of irony. And, well, it sounded as if I'm quoting Søren Kierkegaard, whose, what should I say, final thesis, his master's from the University in Copenhagen was called On the Concept of Irony, with special regards to Socrates. But I think that if you should ever find time to read the novel called Lykke-Per, you will be struck by the cool voice of a narrator that in a way takes a distance to his, or the narrator's own protagonist. I mean, Lykke-Per is also undermined in a way by the narrator himself. It's not only Lykke-Per's own decisions or mistakes that sort of brings him to disaster in a way, if you look at it as a, could have been a kind of a traditional narrative. No, it's also the narrator constantly undermining Lykke-Per himself. That is I would always say, satanic narrative that we have to do with in this novel here. But again, also in order to understand what is going on in the novel, and probably also in the movie, which I won't talk much about, but I will mention it from time to time, is of course an image of Denmark when the novel was written. And Denmark in a period of transformation, you could say, after one of the greatest national disasters ever in the history of Denmark. In the novel, it's also constantly mentioned, namely this disaster, which was the battle at Dybbøl, and which caused Denmark to lose almost 1/3 of the realm, the territory, namely Schleswig and Holstein, present-day Germany, and also the most well-educated part of the population. Schleswig and Holstein were more modern, in a way, than the rest of the Danish realm. And it's on purpose that I call it a realm, because Denmark consisted not only of people speaking Danish, also a German minority, the one lowest, and of course an Icelandic minority, and a minority from Greenland and from the Faroe Islands were part of the Danish realm. So it wasn't in a way a real nation, not what we call a nation state. It became so due to the defeat in 1864, where Denmark was left to be a more, in a way, homogeneous state than it had been before being around. But part of this building the nation was the idea of education. And that is due to another person who is also mentioned in the novel Lykke-Per, namely Nikolaj Frederik Severin Grundtvig, and his idea of the folk high school, a school where people from the countryside, people from land workers' origin and so on, could gather and meet young people from other parts of the Danish society in order to exchange experiences and in order to learn the same myth, the same legend about Denmark, namely Denmark as the oldest monarchy in the world, Denmark's history stretching way back to before Christ almost, and it was Nikolaj Frederik Severin Grundtvig. Now, the undercurrent debate also in Lykke-Per deals exactly with this perspective. And again, Lykke-Per changes his viewpoint from time to time and ends up being a Grundtvigian in a way, and a little more a Kierkegaardian, måske later. So what took place after 1864 is also the history of industrialization of Denmark. Denmark had been a feudal society based upon agriculture. Now, in the 1870s, a new kind of a society emerged. A society based upon industry, and a society in that way producing a new class of people, loosened from their rural backgrounds, namely the working class. In the beginning of the movie Lykke-Per, you'll see him moving in with working class people. It was poor people. There was a struggle every day in order to survive. Nowadays we think Denmark as a welfare society, prosperous, rich, with a well-educated population, and that is the truth in a way. But it was and is the result of a very, very long struggle, organizing working class people. Amongst those that participated in organizing, in educating people, were intellectuals, writers, authors like Henrik Pontoppidan, whose first works are, showing a social indignation on behalf of all poor, socially oppressed people, not only the land workers but also the working class. Later on, I think there is a change in his authorship, in his works, but in the beginning, yes. Now, this struggle for democracy, if you would call that, for a decent society where, with the words of Grundtvig, the broadest shoulders should carry the heaviest burdens, or a society where few have too much and even fewer have too little, is a period of time on which Pontoppidan's Lykke-Per unfolds. Another thing culturally broke through also And it was the Danish literate Georg Brandes who first coined the notion, namely what he called a modern breakthrough. Now, the modern breakthrough had a demand for all artists, writers, playwrights like Henrik Ibsen or like August Strindberg from Sweden. The demand was that they should put problems under debate and they should show things as they were. Now, this is, of course, a kind of a rebellion against Romanticism, which was claimed to be the opposite, namely idealizing all social conflicts, making them into an idyllic picture of Denmark or the world as such. So now there was a demand in literature to write realistic prose. That's very hard actually to be a realist. But that was the aim. And part of this modern breakthrough was Henrik Pontoppidan. Now, it is a little strange that he became part of this modernist movement, you could say, because reading his works, he's a very traditional author. There is no experiment with the form at all. The narrator of Lykke-Per and all the other novels and short stories that he has written is the traditional all-knowing narrator. But to Henrik Pontoppidan, that gave him the opportunity to implement what he called his double view. That is, if you have, let's say, a protagonist that is like the first-person narrator of his or her own story, then you automatically side with that person. Now, the W indicates, in my opinion, and perhaps also in Henrik Pontoppidan's opinion, that you are free as a narrator to commit treason against your protagonist, just as I said it before. And that is what he does with Lykke-Per. Now, this modern breakthrough had its root in something else that broke through in that period of time, namely science. And I think that, and I was a little amazed the first time I sort of found out, and it's many years back, that it's a little amazing that all Danish authors from that period of time became or made themselves familiar with one work that shattered the whole world, namely Charles Darwin on the origin of species. That was a total destruction of all kinds of religious explanations to what life is. And the struggle for life, the survival of the fittest, is also a current running through Lykke-Per and other works from that period of time. I could mention other Danish authors, but that would perhaps be a little too much. So Charles Darwin, but what did Charles Darwin cause by that? Not only the idea of evolution, not only the idea of survival of the fittest, he didn't say survival of the strongest. That is worth to bear in mind, because here he was misunderstood. Survival of the fittest, not the strongest. Now, at least it caused also a turning point in philosophy. And again, surprisingly, many of Danish authors also acquainted themselves with the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche and his idea of the superhuman being, also sprach Zarathustra. We know for sure, because it's something that Henrik Pontoppidan, he himself tells, that while editing the version of Lykke-Per that was published in 3 volumes, he was studying Friedrich Nietzsche, and he was studying another philosopher, which I think we could see in the end of the novel, namely Schopenhauer also. So, again, it might have been that Nietzsche has been misunderstood, but the point is that what Lykke-Per, what Peter Andreas Sidenius incarnates in the beginning of the novel is the idea of the strong, morally, ethically free superhuman. And that he does together with his fiancée. I wouldn't call her his love because, again, everything is undermined in this novel. But his fiancée, Jacobe Salomon, they both dream about a society based upon this idea of freeing themselves from all kind of moral that is tied up with religion. So Nietzsche and Darwin and the idea of evolution, and yet also another thing, namely religion, is occurrent in this novel here. And the discussion or the debate of identity. Who is Peter Andreas Sidenius? Yeah, when he first confronts himself with that question, he cannot answer. To his despair, he cannot answer. He is an empty person, an empty being in a way. So the novel ends up with Peter Andreas Sidenius searching to find the truth about himself. And then he dies. But that's anticipating the end of the novel, not the end of the movie. Sometimes I've been asked if I could give a nice and good definition of literature. What is literature? Or what is fiction? And I don't know, perhaps I do it in an ironic way, but I first of all say that we should be very thankful to God that He created us able to lie. I think that if I should give a very brief definition of literature, I would say it is systematic lying. It's organized lying. And the reason why I touch upon that is that it has been claimed, and Pontoppidan himself helps to that claim, that Lykke-Per is a kind of autobiography. I don't believe them. I don't believe Henrik Pontoppidan either, but it is contributing to the myth Henrik Pontoppidan. Of course there are similarities between this fictitious protagonist called Peter Andreas Sidenius and Henrik Pontoppidan. Both were in a way breaking away from a family. At least Per is doing so, Henrik perhaps a little more doubtful, of a family line of very pious clerics. Henrik Pontoppidan grew up in a family like the family that is shown in the novel. A very stern and rigid kind of Christianity, you could say. A rigid, pious one where the only demands were that you should humble yourself all the time, be modest. very, very Protestantic in my opinion, but that's another thing. Now, Per, the novel, Lykke-Per, has its starting point in the description of Per as a young boy. And Per as a young boy is constantly rebelling against his father, his family. He sneaks out in the night in order to have fun together with the other children. He finds that his father, he despises his father because the father is this poor pastor, this poor minister in the Danish folk church with a lot of children and therefore hardly any money. He feels contempt to this loser in a way. But the father will probably show to be stronger than Per himself is. So, Per departs from his home in order to follow another line of education. He doesn't want and he doesn't have the talent to study any field within the humanities, so he decides that he will become an engineer. And therefore, at the age of 16, he departs in order to study at the Polytechnical Institute in Copenhagen to become an engineer. And he has wild plans. He will change poor little Denmark. He wants to revolutionize it. He wants to bring it into modern times. And especially, of course, his home, his part of Denmark, his home part of Denmark, namely Jutland, it should be modernized. Now again, it's sort of hidden the reason why he should want to do so. But at least, again, it is depicting a debate going on in that period of time in Denmark, namely how to become part of a modern world. A world where you wouldn't be under the thumb of Germany. Remember, Germany was the one that prevailed, the country that prevailed in 1864. And everything, it says in one part of the book, has been dictated ever since from Berlin and Hamburg. So let's create another Hamburg is the vision of Peter Andreas Sidenius. Just show you some of what I call his major works. Pontoppidan, I might be unfair, but that's the ones that I like the most. And yet, his youth. This is a quote from the book, but it might as well be part of Henrik Pontoppidan. Now he began to ask whether he really belonged here. Whether or not he was an orphan his parents had taken in, the more he mulled this over, the likelier it seemed these thoughts that he was not his parents' child remained his idée fixe. It obsessed him for the entire time of his growing up. Not only did it supply the rationale for his exceptional position in the family, but it satisfied his boyish conceit. He had always felt it a kind of humiliation to be the son of a half-blind and toothless man who was mocked by the whole time. He abandoned himself to the dream of being a child left behind by one or another vagabond gypsy band, one of those nocturnal families. Now this is a tragedy of Per. He doesn't want to be a Sidenius. And all of the novel he tries to run away from the name. And that is the idea of how do we become the ones that we actually are. Now again, the irony of the author tells us beforehand that all his struggle is in vain, with very small signals. Whenever Lykke-Per is described, the way in which he moves, he is described in the same way that his father is described. They walk in the same way. They trot the same way. And that gives you the idea, no matter how hard you try to run away from what you are, the shadow of your father will always catch up with you. And so it does. But Per, he pursues his first great project, namely a project that involves a lot of canals in Jutland, that involves building of a harbor, a modern harbor. He projects and gives his projects to his professors at the university, and he is rejected. One sees him, though, as a genius, a little guy called Jan Salomon. And Jan Salomon is the son of the greatest and richest banker in Copenhagen, Philip Salomon. Now the name indicates that they are of Jewish origin. And that is also shown very clearly in Lykke-Per. This anti-Semitism that was part of Danish society in that period of time. And again, the narrator is oscillating between the grossest anti-Semitism that you would ever imagine in the description of the family Salomon, and then to another point, namely showing them as highly intelligent, diligent people, born with a rational way of thinking the world, oscillating between 2 points. Again, the W of Henrik Pontoppidan. Now, the first Salomon he is introduced to is the sister of his later fiancée, namely Nanny Salomon, and he falls in love with her immediately. I mean, in Copenhagen, he has already had at least 3 love affairs before he meets Nanny Salomon. And she is described as this very oriental, almost like a princess. She's beautiful, she has everything, and first and foremost, she has money. So why not, as Per is shown, why not just hit the same project in 2 ways? First, I could have a beautiful wife. Second, she's a millionaire. I could realize my project. So, in all of his relations with the Salomon family, money plays the major role. He's not in love with Jacobi. And sometimes he is. Sometimes he tries to leave her. Sometimes he stays. Sometimes he's cold. Sometimes he's passionate in his way of treating Jacobi. And Jacobi is caught. Because that is the play of domination. First, go near, then take a distance. Stay away. Don't write. Then go back. Then go away again. And in that way, Jacobi is caught as a fly in a spider's net. She can't do anything. And that is the way in which he treats, almost every woman described in the novel, and Jacobi is by far the one that is described the most. Jacobi is, you could say, the other protagonist, if there could be 2 of this novel here. So therefore, all her thoughts we also get access to, I could say. But in his course of time in Copenhagen, he meets up with people from the intelligence, from the art world, and he also meets up with a nobleman called Neergaard. And Neergaard is the one that actually, already in the beginning, foretells what will happen to Per in the end. So that this doesn't sound like a hateful paradox, continued the other. I will say that the unlucky seems to me to be the luckiest. Because the unlucky can always blame the others for his mishaps. That is not something that the lucky man can do. The lucky man can only blame himself if he can't do anything with his luck. Now, I had to take this from the movie, from the film, because there aren't any pictures of Jacobe, as we have pictures from Henrik Pontoppidan. But I think that this is a part where, I know it's a part where he has taken a distance to her. He's trying to break loose. He's back in the track. He's again fallen for other women. He's unfaithful. Per is a womanizer. And, well, she was not at all sure she would be able this time to win him back. And she could count less and less on her own power to hold out. She saw him now as he really was. She now knew thoroughly that side of his character she could examine and judge. With all his natural strength, he was a man without passion. And without the instinct for self-preservation, or, more to the point, he possessed only the negative traits of passion, its cold night side, defiance, selfishness and obstinacy, not its stormy desire, its devouring longing, its hard and purifying, glowing flame. Now, in the end, and I have to make it a little shorter, I can see. In the end, Per, who should have been traveling to America, travels to Jutland. He follows the coffin of his mother, who has died in Copenhagen, and during that night, crossing Kattegat, he becomes religious. No longer the super being above all ethics and morality, above all religion, he turns back to the faith of his mother especially, not the father, but the mother. And therefore, his excuse now for breaking up with Jacobe, or Jacobe as I should have called her in Danish, is religion. I hope it's not Henrik Pontoppidan protesting against this one here. Now, it dawns to Jacobe that there is a side that he has told her about once, or the first time, one of the first time they met, namely that he is like the Scandinavian troll. He can't stand the light that exposes him and tell the world the truth about him. And that is her reflection upon that. But no, his troll nature too thoroughly poisons his blood. He couldn't overcome his need to hide from the light. It was the characteristic Sidonian habit of concealing feelings. At once the significance of his plan for the nation's future disguised his egoism, now religion served as a cover for for his cowardice, his pitiful homesickness. But the point is that Per in Jutland has met yet another woman, namely Inger. She is the daughter of a parson, and he wants to marry her. And they won't accept him in the beginning. First of all, what about all his projects? Second of all, what about his education? He dropped out of Polytechnical Institute. So he travels back to Copenhagen and studies in order to finish, and he returns, and they are married. Happy ever after, it seems. No way. Per is empty, and he is restless. He will never settle. Now, in the course of their marriage, they have 3 children. And Per is not comfortable at all. He can't find out to show love. Not even to his own children can he show love. It's a matter of distance, sometimes trying to near them, and sometimes distance again. And it gradually dawns to him that he's actually doing the same as his father did to him. He can't escape being a Sedinius. So, what to do? Now, he also takes a distance, of course, to his wife, Inger, and she grows suspicious. She's having this imagination that when he was back in Copenhagen, he also went back to Jacob. Now, in the first round, he denies. But then he does something which perhaps is an action of love. Who knows? He admits. But he is admitting something that is not true. He has never seen Jacob after their breakup. But he tells Inger, yes, he still loves Jacob. Yes, he has seen her. Yes, he has been unfaithful to her. And this causes Inger to leave him in the novel. I think it's a little different in the movie. But she moves out of the house. And then the extraordinary thing happened. He turns his eyes to the sky, to heaven, and say, does that suffice? Is that enough now? Namely, giving up everything in his life. The great work he has given up a long time ago. All the canals, all the harbors, everything given up. And now he gives up his children. And why is that? He does not want his son to grow up to be a Sedinius. So he settles down in the outskirts of Denmark, very close to the North Sea, in a bare and deserted part of Denmark, where he is taking care of cleaning the roads. He is responsible for that, and never had roads being cleaner and more clear than when he took over, is one of the points. And he lives alone, only with a housekeeper. He dies in the novel, and another takes over in a way and tells the rest of the story of Per, and that is by the texts, the written texts that he has produced in his solitude, and also the letters that he has kept. And there is one letter from Inger, which I would like to read to you. I have heard you are very sick. And therefore, I'm breaking the silence you imposed on me. I can't have peace of mind without telling you of my infinite gratitude to you for all you are sacrificed for the sake of my happiness. I understand you well now, understand that you only wanted what was best for me, and I can never thank you enough for that. I can greet you for our 3 children who are doing well, like my 2 youngest. Hagbard, and that's the son of Per and Inger, is now a student and will be an engineer. From what everyone says, he has an unusual talent, is a strong and spirited boy who will make his way well in the world. Ingeborg was confirmed this autumn. She and little Lise are still at home with me. They don't know you. You wanted it that way, and maybe that was right. Again, my deepest thanks for everything. God gave you strength to bear what will come. Inger. I can't help but feeling the irony in that letter too. He's trying to give, what should I say, to avoid making his son a Sidenius. And what does the son want to be? An engineer. It's terrible, isn't it? But Per is still reflecting upon life in his papers, and I would like to end up with 2 quotes here. Honor, perhaps I should show, and the old Henrik Pontoppidan. Honor to my youth expansive dreams, and I am still a world conqueror. Every man's soul, I should have said, is an independent universe. Is death the extinction of the universe in miniature? Now, I said that the concept of happiness is, or lykke, is underlying all of the story. Why else call it Lykke-Per? Now, it seems that Lykke-Per ends up finding happiness, having given up all desire to become famous, rich, even all desire to be a family man, a father, an upbringer. But again, I can't help the feeling that this notion of happiness is empty too. Because what he actually does, becoming the absent father, is that he could become the most terrible figure in the world. He's absent, and therefore the goal of all imagination from his children. They can ascribe him everything. That's a terrible destiny. And that's where it ends, the story. Him feeling that he has found peace and, what should I say, in the mind, in the soul, by giving up everything. And then we could perhaps believe that he's right, that this conclusion of resignation, in a way, is the true story of Lykke-Per. I do not. And that's the terrible thing about this novel. And that's the thing that makes me love it again, actually. And I promise not to speak for too long, so I hope that's okay now to end. Thank you for listening to me. Det er